Good day, everyone. I am Shane K. and Tibayang, your discussant for today's lesson. We will be learning about theoretical insights for a post-method era by Hole 2011. In the past, language teaching relied on fixed methods, but as research in second language acquisition evolved, educators started questioning these rigid approaches. The post-method era emerged as a response, emphasizing flexibility, teacher autonomy, and a deeper understanding of how learners acquire a second language. In this discussion, we will explore key SLA theories, including universal grammar, the monitor model, interactionist perspectives, and the role of social and cognitive processes in language learning. By the end of this lesson, we will understand how these insights shape modern language teaching beyond traditional methods. But first, let's talk about the key theoretical debates. Second language acquisition theorists present a range of perspectives on how languages are learned. Some theorists emphasized innate cognitive structures, while others highlight the role of interaction, social context, and output. But Hole 2011 argues that these debates influence language teaching methods and how teachers adopt theoretical knowledge to classroom practices. One of the key debates in SLA is whether language learning is a natural acquisition process or a conscious learning process. Chomsky's universal grammar suggests that humans are born with an innate ability to acquire language. This theory, known as innatism, argues that exposure to language activates an inborn system that helps learners recognize grammar patterns. Krashen further develops this idea by distinguishing acquisition from learning. He argues that fluency comes from acquisition rather than formal learning, meaning that learners need meaningful exposure to language rather than grammatical drills. Critics of innatism argue that it overlooks the role of social interaction and cognitive processing in language learning. Here's an examples. In acquisition, a 3-year-old child moves to an English-speaking country without formal lessons. The child picks up English naturally by listening to family, watching cartoons, and interacting with other children. Over time, they start speaking fluently without consciously thinking about grammar rules. In learning, an adult enrolls in an English class and studies grammar rules, such as verb tenses and sentence structures. They practice writing and speaking exercises, consciously applying what they learned. However, when speaking, they sometimes hesitate because they are mentally checking grammar rules before forming sentences. In short, acquisition happens naturally through exposure, while learning is a deliberate process that requires effort and conscious application of rules. Krashen's monitor model consists of 5 hypotheses that explain how learners acquire a second language. First, the acquisition learning hypothesis. Language is best learned through acquisition rather than explicit learning. Second, the monitor hypothesis. Conscious learning serves only as a monitor or editor, correcting mistakes after speech is produced. Third, the natural order hypothesis. Language structures are acquired in a predictable sequence, regardless of formal instruction. Fourth, the input hypothesis. Learners acquire language when they receive comprehensible input slightly beyond their current level. I+1 is necessary. And lastly, the affective filter hypothesis. Emotional factors such as motivation, anxiety, and confidence influence language acquisition. Based on these ideas, Krashen and Terrell 1983 developed the natural approach, which encourages a low-stress, meaning-focused environment where students acquire language naturally. Critics argue that ignoring explicit instruction can slow down learning, especially in formal educational settings. As SLA research evolved, theories shifted focus from input-based models to the role of interaction and output. Scholars like Long, 1996, argue that language learning is not passive, but an active process where learners engage in conversation, receive feedback, and adjust their language use. This view emphasizes the importance of social interactions in developing communicative competence. Long's interaction hypothesis states that language is best acquired through interaction. When learners struggle to understand, they engage in negotiation of meaning, modifying their language to clarify intent. This process helps learners notice gaps in their language knowledge, leading to improved comprehension and production. Swing 1985 challenges Gratian's emphasis on input, arguing that producing language or output is crucial for learning. She suggests that output allows learners to test hypotheses about grammar and vocabulary, notice gaps in their knowledge, and receive feedback, which helps refine accuracy. This output hypothesis underscores the need for activities that encourage students to speak and write, rather than passively received input. And also, the social constructivist perspectives on language learning. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory emphasizes the role of social interaction and cultural context in language development. His concept of the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, suggests that learners achieve more when supported by a more knowledgeable other, like teacher or peer, through scaffolding. This contrasts with innatist and cognitive approaches, highlighting that language learning is deeply embedded in social and cultural contexts. Next, let's talk about what inside the learner's mind, noticing and information processing. Cognitive research explores how learners process, store, and retrieve language. Smedge 1990 proposes the noticing hypothesis, stating that conscious awareness of linguistic features is necessary for acquisition. Learners who pay attention to language patterns are more likely to internalize them or use them accurately. Noticing plays a key role in explicit learning. As learners become aware of forms they previously overlooked, teachers can enhance learning by encouraging conscious focus on grammatical structures. McLaughlin 1987 describes ISLA as an information processing system. Learners start with controlled processing, where they can consciously focus on grammar and vocabulary. Through practice, language becomes automatized, reducing cognitive load and allowing fluent speech production. McLaughlin 1990 identifies restructuring, where learners suddenly progress after reorganizing their internal language system. This explains why learners experience sudden leaps in proficiency. Language learning as skill learning. SLA is likened to skill learning, where repetition and practice lead to fluency. Speaking a language fluently requires automatic retrieval of vocabulary and grammar, just as riding a bike requires automatic balance control. There are also other cognitive approaches, such as connectionism, views language learning as a pattern recognition, where learners unconsciously detect regularities in input. And processability theory suggests that grammar structures become learnable in a fixed order based on processing complexity. ISLA theories, ELT methods, and cluster methodologies. Hull notes that ISLA theories guide teaching methods, but no single theory fully explains language learning. Teachers must evaluate and adapt these theories based on classroom realities. Here are Ellis' 2005 10 Principles of Instructed SLA. Learners need formulaic expression and rule-based knowledge. Focus on meaning first. Also focus on form. Develop explicit and explicit knowledge. follow learners' natural learning order, provide extensive input, encourage output opportunities, ensure interaction, recognize individual differences, assess both controlled and free production. Scoman 1983 suggests that ESL-A theories like art offer multiple perspectives on learning. Brown encourages teachers to engage in both belief and doubt, assessing which theories align with their classroom experience. Method and methodology, practice, intervention, and theory. Ellis 2005 outlines 10 principles of instructed learning, balancing input and output, implicit and explicit learning, focus on form and meaning, learner differences. This flexible approach reflects modern ELT methodologies moving beyond rigid traditional methods. In summary, the post-method era marks a shift away from one-size-fits-all teaching methods. Instead, teachers adopt eclectic approaches, considering learners' needs, context, and multiple ESL-A perspectives. Hall argues that while theories offer insights, teaching remains an adaptive and dynamic practice where teachers decide what works best for their students. Post-method era highlights no single best method. Teachers must be flexible. ESL-A theories provide guidance but do not dictate practice. TBLT, task-based language teaching, is debated as a modern ESL-A-driven approach. Ultimately, teaching is an art of the possible. Here are the key takeaways of our discussion. Please be reminded that ESL-A is a complex and theories sometimes contradict each other. The post-method era shifts focus to learners, teachers, and context. And teachers must experiment, adapt, and evaluate methods based on effectiveness. Take note, theory may inform decisions, but classroom realities shape teaching. This concludes my discussion. Thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you learned something.